I apologise in advance if I make you hungry with some of the shots coming up. But that's the power of food. Food has got the power to transport you to a destination, has the power to transport you to a time and a place. And here in Fiji, this is what I've discovered. They say it sometimes takes an outsider with fresh eyes to see the true beauty of a country and its culture, and boy, that's been my story here. I'm an Australian who got lost, and I only intended to come for 1 year. That was about 8 years ago. And my employer at the time said, no, you'll stay, you'll get the bug, and I didn't understand what the bug was. And it didn't take long. It probably took about 6 months. And I just fell in love with something that I'd never seen, I'd never experienced. And I wanted to become a Fijian. So all of you who are Fijian, I hope through this little experience today, maybe you'll find something in yourself that you've forgotten or you didn't realise was there. Because for me, coming to Fiji was like, I felt like Alice in Wonderland, if you know the story of Alice in Wonderland. She fell down the rabbit hole and discovered this topsy-turvy world where there were colourful people everywhere, where people smile when it rains. You smile when it rains. That's what I found strange. All different styles of people, religion, like coming from the Western world, if you watch the news now, people overseas don't live in such harmony anymore. And here, you know, regardless of religion, race, creed, we all live in relative peace here. We respect each other's religion. We don't judge each other by skin colour. We don't judge. We just don't judge. And that's a trait that is so unique to this country compared to anywhere else in the world. So when I asked my staff and I asked my people, why is Fiji like this? And the only answer I always got was, that's normal. That's just normal. But to us coming from overseas, that normality, that Fijian way of life is priceless. And when it comes to tourism, and when it comes to food tourism, I've been trying to work out how do I infuse that way of life, that happiness, the ancient gastronomy, and then turn that into a new cuisine. And that's been my driving force for the last, well, it's been 8 years now. I've been very, very fortunate with my work with Fiji TV, Fiji Times, Fiji Airways, to be able to travel throughout Fiji. And I've seen things that most of you probably haven't seen. I've travelled north, south, and I discovered foods that I'd never tasted. So opposed to the foods we serve in the resorts, my first experience with the foods resorts was terrible. I remember first night coming to a new country and getting told about lovo. I thought, okay, what's lovo? And they said, we cooking it in the ground. Okay, that's like a hangi, like New Zealand hangi. Okay, so I was really, really excited and, boy, disappointed. It was just overcooked. It was tasteless. And I said, this can't be right. You guys have been doing this for thousands of years. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know where the disconnect was. Because when I went to those villages, whether it was Kambara, down the south, Kandavu, Tatoya, then going all the way up to the north, Yasawas, all the way around, the food was different. The food was beautiful. And one of the key differences was we'd become disconnected. So these are some of my adventures in the last 8 years, just going out to places, filming things. And when I got to these places, the locals didn't understand why I wanted to do things. I saw things that to them were just normal. I was picking up things and I was trying things off the leaves. Touch wood, I haven't been sick yet, but I've eaten virtually anything that moves, and that's a Chinese trait, by the way. The Chinese learn anything with a heartbeat, you can eat it. And as it was here in Fiji a long time ago as well. So I mean, these are all the images. These are things that I've shown people overseas. But I've been trying to define a food for tourism. Because if I go anywhere else in the world, I'll go to Hong Kong. When I go to Hong Kong, there's this one little shop that sells roast goose. And it's the best roast goose in Hong Kong. But it's tucked away somewhere. But I'll actually get on the plane and go, and that's the first thing I'll do. I'll go back to Australia. One of the first things I do is go and find a good coffee place. There's good coffee here in Fiji now, but I remember years ago, one of the first things I did was look for coffee. So think about Fiji now. What's the food? We've got kokonda. We've got lovo. The curries here are very different, but very nice. But it hasn't been enough. It hasn't been enough to put on the plates of all our resorts. Most of our resorts serve Western food. Now, the theory behind that years ago was, well, they're guests coming from Australia, guests coming from New Zealand. We need to cook their food. And I didn't quite understand that. I didn't understand why a tourist would spend thousands of dollars. And we've got to remember, our tourists aren't rich. They've still got to save their money for a whole year to move the family from wherever, from whichever country to here. And yes, as one of the speakers said earlier, tourism in Fiji is not cheap anymore. It's cheaper to go to Bali. Maybe not as safe to go to Bali, but it's cheaper to go to Bali because you can get there quite cheap, hotels are quite cheap, and food's quite cheap. That's a whole different issue that we'll need to address as an industry, but there's got to be something else that we can create so that a tourist sitting anywhere in the world, when they're choosing their destination, will I go to Hawaii? Will I go to Bali? Will I go to Australia? Will I go to Fiji? And food is one of those elements that can drive and help that decision making. Let me get off. What's it? This was here. This was, I don't know if you can see it. These were the oysters up north of Vanalevu. And they're the oysters that make the They're the oysters that make the pearls. And when we're looking at the pearls, I wanted to eat the oyster. And Jay Hunter Pearls were going, I thought you came to see the pearls. I said, no, I've come to see the oysters. They were the most delicious things I've ever eaten. Crunchy, fresh, but they're not on any plate in Fiji. They're not served anywhere in Fiji. Still not yet. We've got issues with distribution and all that. What does that look like? This is not one of mine, but this, I've been inspired by this dish. This was one of the chefs at Ladala about 5 years ago. And we went up there and we were playing with all different things and he was doing this. That is kokonda. So kokonda we all know is in the coconut with the lolo. And what Anthony had done was create this, and I call this an aquarium. So this, in my restaurants, is called a kokonda aquarium. So you got this all down here, and we can do all different things with this down here, but this is just the sand. He went and picked all the little shells off the beach. And then your kokonda's up here with all the fish, and then I do one where we pour the lolo on the top. But for a tourist coming here, you can't get this anywhere else in the world. So these are the things we're trying to develop. We're trying to develop these sorts of dishes where they're totally different. And this is still about culture. So I was saying before about food transporting us. That technique, the closest technique is a ceviche out of South America. The South Americans did the same thing. This here, I call this elemental cooking. I'm about to now open the Malamala Beach Club, and we're working on techniques. We've got 3 months of food trials. And we're working on things that I now call elemental cooking. And for me, Fiji, wood, fire, smoke, stone are all the elements that we use in ancestral cooking. So whether, it doesn't matter if you come from a Fijian background, Chinese background, Indian background, they're the elements that we use in the cooking. This here is a smoking dish. I think it was a smoked lamb. And you can get machines now that can pump the smoke under a dome. But we serve this now in restaurants here in Fiji. So again, it's done overseas, but when you come and eat this in a Fijian restaurant, served by a Fijian, cooked by a Fijian chef, we're creating that, I'll explain what that is in a second. we're creating this experience of tavu. So even though it's not a rough-looking barbecue, in a restaurant, we're transporting that guest to a village. And this is the power of food. Does anyone know what that is? It's a bit of a close shot, that one. It's a crab. What sort of crab is it? It's a coconut crab. Who's eaten coconut crab? See, not a lot of hands. Not even half the guests. Down south, southern Laos, you can pick these coconut crabs up for about $5, $10. Here in Nandi, they're about $100 now. Oops. Did I do something? If you've never tried this crab has a different taste, obviously because it eats coconut. The tail is like the liver, and combined, this just produces the flavour. Very rarely anywhere else in the world can you eat this. So this is the power again of food in tourism. I can create these things and get people to go, I remember eating that. I remember eating those things. Kokonda. A few extra flowers, more colour. So again, taking the basic and transforming it into something else. So these things are easy to do. But we've got a bit of an issue here in Fiji. Skill levels. Our skill levels still aren't high enough. Why can't Fijian cooks cook like an overseas cook? We put them through school. We've got schools here. We've got the courses here. One of the basic problems we found was that the young, well, especially the boys, don't cook at home when they're young. They make that decision at age 17, 18. They're going to be a cook half the time because they didn't do English properly. This is true. It's true for overseas chefs as well. Most of my chefs can't spell, English we're talking about, can't write, can't read, but they can learn to cook. So I think sometimes that those boys decide to be a chef because they think it's easy. I don't have to follow that A, B, C, D, you know. So yeah, they're the challenges. But look, that's just about education. That's just about more schooling, and it'll take time. It'll probably take us another 5 years. A chef, to me, compared to a cook, a chef's an artist. Our tools are our knives and our pots and our spatulas. Our ingredients are our paints. And the plate is our canvas. That's something that we don't teach yet here in Fiji, but those who are learning are slowly learning that. My dream is that one day we have a Michelin star chef here in Fiji that comes up through the ranks, that puts something on the plate that is so unique, so Fijian, and tastes completely different, that will start to win those global awards. So I guess to leave you, my story can be any Fijian story. I started with no knowledge of Fiji and I had to learn it. It took me 8 years to learn all about your culture and all about your background and the why and the reasons. But you all are Fijian. You just have to learn to get in touch with what it is to be Fijian. And think about this. This is what we do as a tourism industry. We sell water, love, and happiness to the rest of the world. 3 basic human necessities, but people, they buy it from us. What else can we do? It's up to our imagination, and it comes from our heart. So thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me to become a Fijian.